Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a title which has been designated by Criterion at spine number 1222. And this is a work which is described as being from the year 1951. And the name of the filmmaker is Emilio Fernández. And the name of the work is, and please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the language, I hope you can forgive me, but the name of this work is Víctimas del Pecado, or as it's known in English, Victims of Sin. This is the extraordinary, electrifying film, really electrifying, entertaining work, which is described as being from the year 1951. The name of the filmmaker is Emilio Fernández. The director is Emilio Fernández. And among the great crew, we have the cinematography by Gabriel Figueroa, which we'll speak about a little bit later in the context of, for instance, the supplements which form part of this great Criterion release of this film, whose great cast includes, among others, Tito Junco and Rodolfo Acosta, Rita Montaner, and starring the one, the only, the legendary Ninon Sevilla. In this work, which is, and please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the language. I hope you can forgive me. I'm very sorry, but I'll do my very best. But the name of this work is Víctimas del Pecado, or as it's known here for purposes of this release by the Criterion Collection here in English, Victims of Sin. So, Victims of Sin is now in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog on this really great Blu-ray release. It looks and sounds glorious, absolutely glorious, and it is as I mentioned, it is so kinetic, exciting, it's shocking. It's filled with so much drama, melodrama, heightened operatic levels. This just goes through the roof when it comes to these heightened operatic levels of drama and mayhem and love and passion and betrayal and devotion and dedication, as well as a brilliant musical landscape, wonderful musical score, dance numbers. It's a musical. It is a dance number film, as well as a thrilling drama. It's a heightened, intense drama filled with a lot of passion, with a lot of, as I say, a lot of shocking bits as well that form, again, the many brilliantly rendered components of this. One can say brilliantly rendered film, a real classic, a famous film in the context of the cinema of Mexico, the cinema of Emilio Fernández, and also the cinema of Ninon Sevilla and others. This is the work which is Victims of Sin. So I think it's such a great film. On so many levels, and I mean, if we're to try to speak about the story or plot structure of this work, we would be focusing in on one of our main characters, which is Violeta. This is the Ninon Sevilla character, and we understand that she is in this sort of cabaret or dance hall place in sort of Mexico City, the nightlife district, and this of course showcases her incredible prowess and charisma and skill and genius as a dancer, as a performer, and not just herself, but also part of the entourage, part of the great dancers and the party, festive carnival atmosphere, as well as the richness and just the high tempo, high electric kinetic energy of the score and music. That's part of this nightlife that, as I say, is the backdrop or maybe the a parallel of the environment that is also filled with so many heated passions, so many moments of, say, that sense of the nighttime twilight landscape where anything seems to be possible, where passions can turn on a dime into frenzied jealousies, where insecurities might turn vicious and might turn quite sinister indeed. And we see some of those folds of the sinister and the vicious, and indeed quite shocking and deadly when we see other aspects of the nightlife as seen through the lens or through the perspective of Violetta. For instance, we have the relationship, or one of the main figures in Violetta's life. This is one of the owners and one of the sort of the figures of authority, regardless of any sense of a kind of social justice or any sense of righteousness might be concerned. We have one of the frightening figures that towers into the landscape here, and this is Rodolfo. Is portrayed by Rodolfo Acosta, and he has a short temper. He has a way. He has a very sort of a domineering aspect when it comes to his relationships with other women. We understand that he has a kind of complex relationship on the one hand with Violetta, but we also understand he has relationships with other women. And we know this because there is part of the plot that is revealed early on in this film. There is a baby. And there is a child, and we understand too that this child is unwanted, at least from Rodolfo's point of view, much to the dismay and much to the great panic and intense panic that is befalling the mother of this child, and as part of the sort of plot proceedings, the child is seen abandoned, quite literally thrown away in one of the shocking moments of this film. But that's not the end of the tale, because in fact, in many ways, it might be setting the stage for what is the impetus or the heart and soul of the film. Because, as we mentioned, Sevilla's character, who is Violetta, who has her own sense of strength and she is forthright, and she has a strong will, and she is not shy to show the strong will to the point of a kind of a spirited defense of that which she believes, if it's even if it's in the day-to-day mundane, or maybe the day-to-night nightlife mundane in the context of the night world, the rumbera world, but also in moments where there are a lot of stakes, life and death stakes concerned. And when she sees, through a set of circumstances early on in the film, when Violetta sees a baby abandoned in this way, she immediately goes to its rescue, to the baby's rescue, and immediately cares for it. And her motherly instincts kick in quite forcefully, and with a degree of a sense of social justice, and also a sense of sort of the character strength that her Violetta embodies quite evidently and quite immediately, to the point where she is caring for the baby, and she wants to care for it despite the busyness of her nightlife, and despite how people in the vicinity, the people that she works for, may or may not be so pleased with this turn of events, while others, maybe other people, other women in her immediate sphere of the nightlife rumbera atmosphere, the cabaret atmosphere, might be sympathetic or even empathetic to her position, and might be showing a sense of support, both emotionally as well as in terms of rearing the child, at least in the immediate short term. And we see also her relationship with this really almost authoritarian and quite short-tempered figure of Rodolfo really come to a head, which affects her and the child to the point where she has to take matters in her own hands, in a manner of speaking. And so therein lies sort of the fracturing of a trajectory of certain character arcs, so where we see one one of the other main characters, that being Rodolfo, being confronted with a certain set of circumstances that brings him out of the immediacy of the proceedings, at least for the time being. We also see the entrance of another character. This is the Tito Unco character, Santiago, who seems to portray quite the opposite. In terms of Rodolfo's vicious, vicious, almost perhaps overcompensating masculinity on the one hand, and then we have Santiago, who seems to express something more akin to affection and real tenderness and a sort of understanding, which also leads to a parallel relationship, in a manner of speaking, between the Santiago character and Ninon Sevilla's character of Violeta, and also a different aspect of the nightlife culture that's concerned, as well as the care and rearing and upbringing of the young child. And we see also the passage of time and years in terms of that kind of maybe family dynamic that's established, maybe given a certain set of adverse circumstances, admittedly, but still established in a way that might provide a certain sense of salvation and also gratification and also emotional reward for Violeta and the young child and Santiago and everyone concerned for the well-being of these people. As well as, of course, keeping on with the high kinetic, wonderfully frenzied, festive atmosphere of the music and the dance numbers that form part of the milieu of the nightlife that's part of the background and indeed the foreground. It's a great parallel in terms of the fire and passion and devotion of Sevilla's Violeta, just the way that she is so kinetic and so commanding with the audience around her, just as she's so kinetic and commanding with being so devoted to the well-being of this child, her child, and what kind of positive circumstance that might bring with it in terms of the potential of, say, or the continuation of her own career, the rearing of the child into young boyhood, and then also her potential relationship with Santiago. But as with a film that has so many points of heightened passion, to the point that it boils over into tragedy and, again, life and death stakes, we must not forget that there is also the earlier character of Rodolfo, who may have been temporarily removed from the picture, but temporarily, because perhaps one day Rodolfo might return after a long absence. And when he returns, what will that mean for the young child? What will that mean for the other man, Santiago? And what will that mean for our main character, Violeta, Sevilla? And all that she has spent her life and the blood, sweat, and tears, everything that she has spent for the well-being of her child and herself. What will that mean when Rodolfo comes back? Will everything be the same? Will things be different? If there are indeed things that are different, how will Rodolfo act? Will Rodolfo act with acceptance and kindness, or, as we might perhaps possibly guess, might he react in a more vicious way? Might he react in a more violent way? And might he react in a more unexpected and shocking way? And if the latter is the case, then what does that mean for our protagonists, and specifically Violeta? Because after all, we understand all the way throughout the film, through, among other things, the boldness and freshness of Ninon Sevilla's performance, that Violeta is a character that won't take things, won't let things happen to her without putting up a defense, without putting up a fight, without fighting for that which she truly believes in. And when her heart's in it, when she's utterly devoted to a cause or to an idea or notion, or in this case perhaps to a person or persons, to a man in the form of Santiago, or to this young boy, this young child, when she is truly and utterly devoted, her very heart and soul devoted to protecting those that she loves, even when immediacy and vicious threats, as presented by Rodolfo, emerge back into her life, will she let things happen to her the way they might happen, or will she stand up for herself and those that she loves, and will she put up this fight to protect everything that she has fought so hard to live for and to fight for. And if and when that happens, what will be the stakes? And indeed, what, if anything, will be the result when all these fireworks and explosions go off in an extravaganza of heart and soul and melodrama and opera and song and dance and the throes and heat of passion and the life and death stakes where people may live or people may die, but to do it for the things that move them, that sway their hearts and sway their minds in a way that once they walk down a certain path, there's no looking back. It's all here in this, as I say, an entertainment extravaganza. So many beats that are just truly enthralling in this work. Victims of Sin, Víctimas del Pecado. And I must say that, as I say, there are some moments that are just unflinching, and they are truly jaw agape, leaving one aghast type of moments. And they come maybe in moments of dialogue or way some characters treat other characters. I mean, it's a rough world that we see depicted in Victims of Sin. It's really rough and it's really quite frightening. And we see how characters are confronted with choices that they have to make. And sometimes those choices might seem reasonable in our sensibilities as viewers of this film, but other times we might be left feeling uneasy, disquiet, or perhaps even very disturbed at what is potentially to transpire. And so when we see the potential of a kind of darkness in many parts of the aspects of the environments that are depicted in Victims of Sin, I mean, we are perhaps left to wonder if this indeed is a wholly cynical work. But I must say that there are moments of light that are shone in terms of an optimism or hope. I think one of those lights that are shining are when we meet the characters again, as portrayed, for instance, by Tito Junco's Santiago, and of course, the legendary Ninon Sevilla and her fiery emotion, her strength of will, and charge, and as well as the electricity, kinetic energy, the beautiful kinetic energy, the hypnotizing way in which she can command the room, command the screen with her movements and motion and dance. It's really it's commanding, and it's quite enthralling. And so we are one with her story. And again, that's, I think, due in large part to Ninon Sevilla's performance. And of course, the performances all around, and I should mention Rodolfo Acosta. In, again, it is a very devilish performance indeed. And it makes his movements make everything that transpires, even from the very start of the film, everything that transpires has such a weight to it. And so it is enthralling, captivating, very heavy indeed, while also giving us so much of the rhythms and the cadences of the dance numbers. So many great dance numbers. This is a musical film. This is a dance musical film, as well as a heightened operatic melodrama that is so entertaining to the max. And tensions are just palpably tense, and barroom brawls, fights ensue that are just epic, absolutely epic, and it's I think mirroring the type of epic nature of the emotional scope of the heart and soul of this film, Víctimas del Pecado, a really eye-opening experience, a very eye-opening experience, and as I say, so entertaining, sometimes dark and disturbing, other times very hopeful, with a sense of admiration, and the lights that are shining in terms of the emotional arcs, as well as, of course, the upbeats that guide us with the kinetic frenzy of the brilliance of the music, and the way that it carries us through from beginning, middle to the very end. I mean, this is one of those hugely, supremely entertaining works. Again, it's very famous in the context of the cinema of Mexico and cinema of Emilio Fernández and, Sevilla, and it's a great example of just utterly compelling cinema. So this is the work directed by Emilio Fernández, and this is Victims of Sin. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Victims of Sin, on this new Blu-ray edition on the occasion of this year 2022 or 2024, excuse me. The spine number is 1222, excuse me. So spine number 1222 for this release in 2024. Emilio Fernández's Victims of Sin, again described as being from the year 1951. And this is described on the back of the case as being purported to be based on a new 4K digital restoration with uncompressed monaural soundtrack. And I have the disc in the player right here with a wonderful menu that is mirroring the artwork here. It's great artwork, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in the discussion points of this video. But again, going back to a conversation about the 4K restoration materials upon which this Criterion Collection release is based, I have removed, for purposes of the discussion, the fold-out insert as part of this Criterion Blu-ray disc release. And it says here, among other things that's listed here, it says about the master, and I quote, "Victims of Sin is presented in the aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1. This new 4K restoration was created from the 35mm nitrate original camera negative. The original monaural soundtrack was remastered from the 35mm optical track negative." Okay, so once again, I admit wholeheartedly from the outset that my experience with this film is not enough to provide any kind of complete analysis of the presentation, how it looks and sounds. So it's only based on my own subjective viewpoint upon what I watch here. But I must say, what's the phrase? Blew my socks off. Just it looked crisp and fresh and vibrant. There is a kind of vividness to the black and white photography that feels very much bold and enhanced and enlightened. The cinematography by Gabriel Figueroa, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it feels, I mean, there are moments of, you can feel the heat and the sweat. You can feel the smokiness of the nightlife atmosphere. You can also feel the sort of the passions and the throes as they're shown in the city, and the way that, say, outdoor scenes are shown. You know, there's particular uses of trains and passages of trains, and also exteriors and interior scenes, and the way that light and shadow are presented here as well. Sometimes there might be alleyways in the dark. There might be some bright lights in the bar, or in the intimate quarters of a bedroom, etc. It's all here in it, and it looks and sounds so alive. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a kind of blemish or anything at all, and everything was so wonderfully and beautifully delineated, such that when I was watching the film and I was listening to the film, it felt like I was just so totally absorbed. I had no distractions to my eye in terms of any kind of a blip or blemish that took me out even for a moment. Nothing of the sort. Nothing of the sort. I was totally swept up. I think that has a lot to do with how vivid and how great the black and white photography looks, and how it sounds here as well. I mean, that's another thing too. The soundtrack is dynamite. So I feel like the soundtrack is also quite preserved here. I had a great time with this Criterion. I absolutely had a great time with this, and I think, you know, for anyone who is more expert in this film than I, who knows this film better than I hope that you might agree with my assessment. I mean, I think, again, from my own standpoint, again, with my limited exposure to this film and my limited next to no understanding of the release history of this film, you know, given those limitations on my part, I can say still that I had a real had a real great time with this presentation, how it looks and sounds. So call me impressed, because I am very much so with this Victims of Sin release from Criterion. Okay, so let's continue on with other aspects of this release, and let's turn to the supplements, which are part of this Criterion release. So as I mentioned before, I have the disc, the Blu-ray disc, in the player behind me. It's a great Blu-ray disc menu. I love this artwork, which we'll talk, as I say, again a little bit later in this video. But first, let's touch upon the supplements. And as you can see, we have the movie, and then chapters, and then subtitles, and then supplements. So I press the supplements menu, and what do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 supplements by my count. And these are, so the first one is Viviana Garcia Besne, And this is described as, and I quote, "In this interview, recorded by the Criterion Collection in 2023, filmmaker and film preservationist Viviana Garcia Besne discusses Cuban-born actor Ninon Sevilla's iconic stature in Mexican cinema and the uncredited contributions she made to her films behind the scenes." Yes, so this is approximately 17 minutes, and Viviana Garcia Besne talks about her appreciation and love and passion for Mexican cinema, the cinema of Mexico, and also her role as a preservationist, and also her role in terms of the history. And she has family connections, as she will reveal, not just with important movements of and important figures of Mexican cinema, but also with kind of a direct lineage line, if you will, between her and her family members and relatives, and also Ninon Sevilla as well, which is really, really interesting indeed. And also she mentions too, among other things, she is interested in cataloging the history, archiving, documenting the history of the cinema of Mexico. And part of her efforts and endeavors over the years has been talking with Ninon Sevilla directly. Which she recounts a little bit here. And she mentions an interesting anecdote about how Ninon Sevilla would refer to herself when they spoke, I think over the phone, sometimes not as herself, but maybe as a sister talking on behalf of Ninon Sevilla. So almost like Ninon Sevilla was stepping out of herself in order to speak about herself in this interesting, circuitous type of way, which I find very fascinating. And then this allows for a discussion here. It's a one-on-one conversation. It's really great. It's almost also in a way a kind of primer or an introductory route into certain aspects of the cinema of Mexico, the cinema of Mexico, around 1950s. 1940s, 1950s. So she mentions here, for instance, Pedro Calderon, and her connection with Pedro Calderon, and also the connection between Calderon, a very powerful film producer, and also Ninon Sevilla, which she posits here as being one of the reasons that Ninon Sevilla was able to get a lot of influence and essentially a lot of power in terms of her role in the various films that she made. And she does mention too about how her film debut and also actually I should take a step back. Sevilla's own biography or early life in terms of being born in Cuba, and also she kind of came across a life choice early on in her life, whether she would pursue dancing and the entertainment world, or whether she would become a nun and go into a convent. And that's due to, among other things that's mentioned here, the very strong influence of her Catholic grandmother. But she decided, Sevilla decided to give the world of dance a try, and if it didn't work out, then she'd go into a convent. At least that's what Viviana Garcia Besne says here. But lo and behold, Sevilla was very successful as a dancer, and then through her meeting with Pedro Calderon, who's also a very powerful film producer, she was able to get entry into the world of cinema, the cinema of Mexico, and she made a very memorable debut, which led into her more roles, and ultimately leading to, among other things, among her great roles, that of Violetta in works, Violetta in this film, Victims of Sin. So this is also a discussion too about the rumbera, and it became a kind of genre or subgenre of films of this category, the rumbera films, as is described here. Cabaretera and also rumbera, how this is the films about women who are in the dance hall or the cabaret or the nightclub scene, and there's oftentimes a lot of drama, a lot of melodrama with female protagonists as our main characters, such as Ninon Sevilla, who portrayed a lot of these types of characters in films such as Victims of Sin, and also how this created a kind of trajectory in terms of what kinds of stories were being told, and how this was able to showcase, among other things, maybe socially the gender roles as expected by society, and I'm using air quotes here, And that shows in terms of maybe the male-female relationships, where sometimes there is a sense of over-domination or authoritarianism even, which is reflected in a lot of the male-female relationships that we see, for instance, in the film Victim of Sin. And how Neil Sevilla's characters or characterizations or people in her like position, the Rumbera film role, how they would react or respond to this, and in terms of how their lives would be just earth-shatteringly affected from there on out, but how they would handle it in the way that was still consistent with their characters, as well as also showcasing, as I say, the wonderful musical and dance numbers that form part of the Rumbera spirit. So I think when we hear this in this conversation here, we are automatically reminded of aspects of Victims of Sin that make it so extraordinary across the board. So, and also we understand that Nino Sevilla had a lot of key relationships behind the scenes that really helped her in terms of her own understanding and influence in the cinema industry of Mexico, as well as what she could do behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. So she meant, as I mentioned, there's her relationship with Pedro Calderon, the very powerful film producer. There's also Rita Montaner as a kind of, as it's described, a kind of Madrona figure. And then also how her influence in terms of her heritage or her lineage and heritage and cultural identity from Cuba, how that also influenced other artists that were able to come to Mexico and really not just earn a living, but become really famous. So Perez Prado is mentioned here as well in terms of the musical heritage. And also, Sevilla during this period enjoyed a lot of success with her films. There are huge critical commercial successes. And that at one point she's described as being the best paid actress of that particular production company, and that there was a sense of she could begin to command, again, maybe among other things through a lot of the influence that she was able to wield. She could command certain production choices as well, in order to really augment and highlight her characters, as well as aspects of the film overall. So this oftentimes meant maybe her desire to work with top-of-the-line talent such as the legendary Gabriel Figueroa, the cinematographer, who's already a legend at this time in terms of how the cinematography is able to heighten sort of the landscape and the vista and sort of the cultural heritage of Mexico, while also really giving the face and the visage so much prominence and beauty and glamour, as we see here in Victims of Sin. And some of those close-ups of Nino Sevilla and others are just, utterly sublime, to die for. No wonder Nino Sevilla wanted to work with such top talent as people like Gabriel Figueroa. And then also working with great top line talents as the director Emilio Fernández, who has huge illustrious career leading up to Victims of Sin, and also including Victims of Sin, but also, according to this conversation here, also had a very strong personality, and such strong personality that sometimes on set there would be instances where his personality and Neon Sevilla's personality would really clash, and maybe there would be some fights that might break out, leading him to storm off the set. But then, even in those moments, Neon Sevilla was really trying to command the production, trying to make sure that there was still kind of no interruption. So that shows her artistic instincts, I think, in high gear already. So really interesting stuff indeed. Also, too, Viviana Garcia Besney mentions that in this context, as an example, there are instances where Nino Sevilla had a lot of choices made from the production level. Sometimes maybe also with music or musical lyrical choices, maybe directing choices as well. But oftentimes, or most often, those would go uncredited. She wouldn't get a credit for those, say, directing or producing choices. But again, I think one of the great aspects of Viviana Garcia Besney's comments here is that she wants to really showcase that Nino Sevilla was really an all across the board kind of Renaissance artist, in a manner of speaking. So. So just, I think it's just even highlighting yet another legendary aspect of this legend that is Nino Sevilla. So it's great. Also, too, speaking of the story, victims of sin. As we mentioned in the earlier discussion of this video, one of the components of the film Victims of Sin is the way in which the Violetta character responds to the child, the abandoned baby, and how she is so devoted immediately to the well-being of this child. And Viviana Garcia Besne maybe posits that perhaps that might have been due to certain circumstances of Niño Sevilla's own personal biography, her own personal life, that may have, again, it's quite possible, we're not sure, but it might have provided some kind of basis for a lot of the emotional resonance of her performance there. So, and also too, just taking a step back here, just adding another aspect which is really important. Again, the idea of a very strong female lead character as a sense of, as mentioned here, I think the phrase is empowerment. I think also there is a real compelling nature that we are drawn to immediately. I mean, there's sort of the pull of the charisma of Niño Sevilla that makes us side with her immediately. And we want to see her succeed. We want to see her happy, and we want to see her free from all the ill will that we are also privy to in this world of victims of sin. So there is, and also that's in front of the camera, but also behind the camera. There is a sense of a kind of empowerment. There's also a sense of a kind of a commanding one's own destiny. Based on one's will and also one's wants and what one wants. And I think that is on display in terms of Niño Sevilla's life and her role as a filmmaker, as an artist, and as an actor, and as a performer and dancer. And also her character Violetta as well. And so there's these wonderful parallels, which is, again, a great segue or a great way of exemplifying the rumbera, or this aspect of this period of the cinema of Mexico during the 1950s in this work, again, directed by Emilio Fernández, Victims of Sin. So this is great. This is a really great conversation. It's approximately 17 minutes, but I don't hold myself at all. I don't hold myself at all to be in any way, shape, or form an expert when it comes to any cinema anywhere. Let alone, for instance, the cinema of certain areas, such as the cinema of Mexico or in the 1950s. So I'm not an expert in that at all. And so to hear this discussion is very eye-opening, and I learned so many things about this. So I recommend it so much. So please check this out if you can. That's the first supplement here of Viviana Garcia Besne. Then we have Rodrigo Prieto on Gabriel Figueroa. And it's described here as, in this interview recorded by the Criterion Collection in 2024, Oscar-nominated cinematographer Rodrigo Prieto discusses the style and legacy of a master of his craft, Gabriel Figueroa, who shot Victims of Sin. So this is approximately 16 minutes. So Rodrigo Prieto is a very renowned, very celebrated cinematographer in his own right, and he's speaking about Gabriel Figueroa, who he describes as an iconic cinematographer. And so he talks about sort of his. There's a legend. Whether or not it's true, he kind of questions, but he mentions this in a way as a kind of illuminating, illustrious legend in terms of waiting for the clouds and how this might be. Regardless, or in any event, Figueroa was so intent on getting the details, and there was such a mastery that he had in terms of capturing the details of nature and the countryside and the spirit of the land, as well as the interior scenes, as well as close-ups. There's a real glorious way in which everything is captured here. And then also too, there's a kind of way in which there is an attention to detail that is very similar or reminiscent of the great mural artists, the mural painting artists. And so he describes this as a muralist. Figueroa is a type of cinema muralist, which I think is a very apropos phrase. And then also his connection and his body of work, or his collaboration with the director Emilio Fernández, is mentioned here as well. Which is great too. I mean, there's a way in which there's a what's the word I'm looking for? There is versatility. Yeah, there's a versatility that's showcased here in terms of, say, showing a sense of the outdoors and countryside vistas in some of his works. Also, the way in which certain other films, such as Victims of Sin, showcase also kind of almost an urban modernity that might give way or yield to a sense of darkness as well as exposure and lighting too. I mean, there's great contrast between the dark and the light, which I think holds for a real commanding sense of detail. And also, too, Prieto mentions the idea of depth of field and the use of specific calculations of lenses and camera distance in order to keep things in the foreground in focus and also things in the background in focus. So you have everything essentially within the frame and in a sort of three-dimensional space, everything in focus, which is a real difficult thing to do in terms of the intensity of lighting that's involved, as well as the precision that, it leaves almost no room for error. So what that also means too is that in a film where such depth of field is meant, and there's a reference to the very celebrated film cinematographer Greg Toland. So, but the point also that's raised here is the idea that when you look at a film like Victims of Sin with everything in focus, that means that things in the background, details of other figures in the background, as well as stuff that's happening in the foreground, and there's a lot of stuff happening in Victims of Sin, in essentially every part of the film. There's so much stuff happening, but we as audience members, as viewers of the film, have the option of choosing what we can focus on, which I think is a really great, almost interactive experience of watching a film like Victims of Sin. So those are, I think, really great details as well. And also, again, he was a very famous cinematographer, so much so that his name would often appear on the marquee or on the poster, according to Roger Prieto. And also, too, this is a film where he's involved. Again, the rumbera, the musical dance numbers are part of the appeal. And also, we can see, therefore, his camera were capturing the musicians in a kind of formation. The intensity of light, as I mentioned before, is sort of this intense, glowing atmosphere that is, I think, meant to evoke or make manifest in a cinematic way the heightened frenzy and festival carnival-like atmosphere of the nightclub ambiance. So this is a really great discussion with Rodrigo Prieto, so please check it out if you can. Approximately 16 minutes, so please, yes, it's another great one, so please check that out if you can. Then the third supplement is called here in English, Those Who Made Our Cinema. And this is described as, and I quote, this 1983 episode from the television series Those Who Made Our Cinema, which examines the history of cine de rumberas genre, features interviews with actor Ninon Sepia. And in fact, there are other interviews as well. This is approximately 28 minutes. And it's an interesting, it established some kind of fundamental details about sort of the history and politics of Mexico in the late 1940s into the 1950s, and then also the national cinema, the sort of national identity of Mexico in as it's embodied in very famous examples of cinema, and then also this leads to a discussion of the cabaretera and also the rumbera film, the dance hall or the cabaret film, the nightclub scene film, focusing in on the performer, the rumbera, the dancer, the actor-singer, which leads to stories that also can involve a certain sense of social consciousness, social mobility, classes oftentimes touched upon, gender role or social conventions and expectations regarding gender roles and how those roles are either exemplified or defied, depending on the types of stories that are told in the various forms of the rumbera film or the cabareta rumbera film. And a kind of empowerment, a social empowerment that's also on display here as well. And also the kind of the parallel between the connection between the urbanization population aspect of this changing landscape of Mexico during the mid 20th century, and also how that has a link possibly to the developing psychologies of the people, the characters in the films, and well as the population writ large. So, and then we have some references, points to Nino Sevilla, but also Roberto Cobo, Rosa Carmina, Mario Lopez as well. And there's actually Emilio Fernández is spoken about here, and also film Salon Mexico is mentioned here as well. So it's, I think, overall a really great discussion. I think maybe at the very end, I think there's some key spoilers when it comes to one of the films. I think it's Salon Mexico at the tail end of the this episode here, which is, I should have said it here, it's approximately 28 minutes. So, but that's okay. I think for the most part, I mean, it's really well organized, and it's going into, again, more in depth into Rumbera specifically. I wouldn't necessarily call it Victims of Sin specific. It's not. It actually talks more about other films than it does Victims of Sin, in fact. So, as I mentioned, Salon Mexico, which I just mentioned just now. But if you're okay with that, I mean, it's I think so filled with a lot of educational points. Again, more context and more examples of the rumbera, this aspect, genre or subgenre, really important category in the cinema of Mexico. Very popular, and some anecdotes about that. So please check this out if you can. It's very illuminating. Again, it's approximately, what did I say? Approximately 28 minutes. So please check that out. And then the trailer. This is a really cool trailer because I think it's a modern day trailer, but it's modern, it's made recently. But it's done in a way, because I think there's reference to new 4K restoration or something like that. So that would suggest that it's a very recent trailer. I don't think they had 4K restorations back in the 1950s. So, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure. But in any event, that's my assumption. And if my assumption is correct, then that means this is a modern made trailer. But it's done in a way that's mimicking the great style of the titles that you see emerge in these wonderful trailers from the 1950s. So it has that wonderful edge to it, which I really admire. So that's the fourth of the four supplements that we find together with this Criterion release of Victims of Sin. So it's good. It's pretty good. I would have loved to have had a commentary track. I would love to have had maybe something. We have some great stuff about Nino Sevilla. We have some great stuff about the Rumbera. What else? And we have some details that emerge about Emilio Fernandez in the supplements overall. Oh gosh, what else can I ask for? Maybe are there more possibilities for maybe some aspects of the music of this film, or maybe some of the other actors in this film, maybe discussion about some of the other famous actors that appear here and where else they've appeared in the cinema of Mexico during this time. That might have been really interesting. But again, I'm still overall very impressed with this set of supplements, and I think I've learned so much. And I've seen the supplements now a total of, well, except for one, I've seen 3 times. The others I've seen 2 times through. So I hope to be able to continue to watch those because, again, I've learned so much from these. And so now let us conclude our conversation by talking about other aspects of this physical media release. I gotta come to this artwork here, which I adore. I think this is so cool. Look at that. I mean, this is Nino Sevilla, and we see here some of the other key characters here in this wonderful combination of color and sort of the almost the painting-like artwork here. That also has a sense of the Victims of Sin font, which I love. It has that hand-painted look to it, which also is reminiscent of that kind of a shocking font of the 1950s. Again, for lack of a better phrase, I apologize, but I love this artwork. It's great, and you see further aspects and examples of the artwork here in the fold-out, which is what I have. Look at this use of color. It's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I love this. In terms of the production credits and the art directors Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, illustration Lauren Tamaki, designer Eric Skillman, art production coordinator William Breeze, print production artist Craig Phillips, art assistant Julie Sussman. Bravo! Bravo! I think this is really quite splendid. And then I should just say too that it's also included in terms of the way that the disc looks here. And then also the background art, excuse me for the glare here, the background art, that's a part of this as well. The insert would go on this side, which I'll put back. I'll return it towards the end of this video. But before I do that, a word about the insert. So the artwork's great. Again, I am not at all a fan of the fold-out type. I really wish that Criterion might do more with the staple booklets. I really do. I really don't like the fold-out. Oh well, c'est la vie, as it were. But that's okay, because one of the great benefits of this fold-out, or this insert, is the essay, which is right here. And I love this essay. As I mentioned before, this is, among other things, a great jumping off point for my own further learning about Mexican cinema, and specifically this film, Emilio Fernández and Sevilla, etc. So, and Rumbera, etc. So, here, Jacqueline Avia's essay here is called "Dancing in the Dark." And so, as I say, this is great. It establishes further context of the history of cinema in the 1940s through the 1950s, which is, it's so perfectly, it's so wonderfully expressed and written here, easy to digest, very welcoming, and also some specifics about the film Victims of Sin, excuse me. Really wonderful, and then placing the sort of an analysis of the Violetta character, the main character, Violetta's character, in certain contexts that make for even more illuminating a discussion and analysis of this great film, Victims of Sin. So, Dancing in the Dark. You got to check out this essay when you have a moment. It's wonderful. Again, like with all the other essays, my strong suggestion is that you watch the film first, and then after you watch the film, you can read the great essay. That's part of the Criterion release. So now I will put the leaflet or the insert back into its case and close the case, and voila, there you go. Victims of Sin, as released by the Criterion Collection. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. So thank you very much for joining me. As always, I very much I'm so happy to always see you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. But until we see each other again, please continue to be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies, such as Victims of Sin, such as other works by Emilio Fernández, other works featuring Sevilla, other films in the Criterion Collection, and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.